Another day, another banger. Today we'll be going over the Sherlock Holmes movies. This will be the 2 Robert Downey Jr. movies and will include Sherlock Holmes as well as Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows. Without further ado, there will be some spoilers ahead, and as always enjoy the recap. Sherlock Holmes opens up in the 1890s in London where multiple carriages ride through the street. Inside one of the carriages, Inspector Lestrade arms himself alongside Dr. John Watson. With the carriages piled up with police officers, they chase a man on foot. That man, Sherlock Holmes, hides inside the building and spots a guard. He then begins analyzing how he will neutralize the guard, and when the time is right he takes him out and steals his lamp. Going down the stairs, a woman there is lying flat on a table surrounded by a demonic cult. Reading a prayer over the soon-to-be sacrificed, Sherlock watches the scene from above and is simultaneously attacked and saved by Watson. The 2 men shake each other's hands and Sherlock learns the inspector is getting his troops lined up. One by one, the duo take out the cult members and get to show off their fighting skills. Being shot at, the 2 remain vigilant and continue their assault while the girl on the table seems to be possessed by the man reading something above her. As she goes to use the knife, Sherlock stops the sacrifice and the fire around them turns off. With the hooded man knowing exactly who his 2 intruders are, the doctor goes to arrest him but is stopped by Sherlock, who found a hidden blade. Breaking it to pieces, the satanic leader is revealed to be Lord Henry Blackwood. With the police finally arriving at the scene, they grab the woman who needs immediate medical attention. And with that, Blackwood is arrested, and Sherlock is applauded by the inspector, who is then photographed alongside the duo. Some while later at Baker Street, we see the townsfolk going about their daily business. At 221B Baker Street, Watson speaks to the landlord and tells him he is soon to move out. With Sherlock being a disgusting and appalling neighbor, the tenants next door want the doctor to extend his engagement, but he chuckles. Hearing gunshots from Sherlock's room, the doctor enters to find him shooting at the wall. Claiming to be in the process of inventing a device to silence a gunshot, Watson doesn't want to hear it. Not having a case in over 3 months, Sherlock is one very unique individual. With many people asking for his assistance, Sherlock solves their cases by just looking at them. Watson demands Sherlock to leave his apartment and spend a little time outside and forcefully invites him to dinner alongside his soon-to-be wife. Once night hits, Sherlock arrives early and just looks at people around him. Soon enough, Watson arrives and introduces his beloved, Mary Morstan. Being a fan of Sherlock and his deductive powers, he decides to show off and use them on Watson. Analyzing the small details, Mary isn't impressed as he already knows Watson and wants herself to be analyzed. Watson wants Sherlock to shut up, but after Mary insists, he begins explaining her entire life to her, including her exes and everything alike. Mary chucks a drink at Sherlock for embarrassing her and getting some details wrong. Walking off, Watson joins her just as the food arrives. Later, Sherlock heads to a bare-knuckle underground fight. Fighting a massive unit, the brawl continues on for some time until Sherlock gets whacked, with everyone laughing at him. A woman winks at him from the crowd and Holmes goes to leave, but the man refuses.
Cheek. And body shot. Full psychological recovery, 6 months.
Putting his plan into motion, Sherlock obliterates his attacker in seconds according to his predictions and shuts the crowd up. Walking away, he picks up a bottle and leaves without saying a word. At prison, the guards are all on full alert as they think one of their own has been put under a spell by Blackwood. With the warden asking Blackwood what's going on, he demands to see Sherlock Holmes. Back to Sherlock in the meantime, he begins playing his guitar to trapped flies. With Watson releasing the captured flies, he tells his friend that Blackwood's last request is to see him. The following day, the duo ride a carriage and make their way to the soon-to-be executed. With Sherlock not shutting up and just yapping, Watson decides to punch him in the face. Saying he already knew his beloved was engaged, this duo have a very peculiar vibe about them. With London booming with people everywhere, the 2 men arrive to find a crowd asking for Blackwood's release. Sherlock then enters the prison on his own, and as he is being escorted, the guards say that Blackwood has the ability to get inside people's heads. As Sherlock approaches the cell, he hears Blackwood murmuring something satanic covered by markings all around the walls. Hearing Sherlock outside, the 2 begin their discussion. Holmes mentions his regret of not catching Blackwood sooner as 5 are dead, and Blackwood tells him it was only done out of necessity. Sherlock asks if he can dissect his brain after his death, but Blackwood wants him to understand the gravity of what will soon happen and how they are bound together. Claiming that 3 more people will die and there is nothing Holmes can do to save them, he walks away and tells the guards watching that the priest will not be needed. With sentencing taking place soon after, the use of black magic and the murder of 5 people will result in his death. He is then immediately executed and killed. With his corpse being checked, Watson confirms that Blackwood is dead. Returning home a while later, Sherlock hears a woman in his house and sees an old acquaintance named Irene Adler. Saying she was abroad and has finally returned, Sherlock starts acting quite strange. With robberies taking place around the globe, Sherlock has deduced it was Irene behind them, and she is caught lacking. She then admits to coming down to London for help in tracking someone down. Not trusting her one bit, she places some money down and goes to leave. Once she's out the door, Watson walks upstairs, and Irene enters a carriage to tell a masked man that he'll do it. The hidden figure then speaks about Blackwood and how the man Sherlock is searching for is the key. Some homeless beggar then hits the carriage, and the hooded man aims a weapon at him to back off, which he does. Back at the apartment, Watson laughs at his friend's taste in women, the only adversary that has ever beaten him, and Watson is confused as to why Sherlock jumped out the window. Holmes silences his friend and explains the situation. After Irene left, he had grabbed some clothes and jumped out of the window. Dressing up and making his way into an alley, he followed Irene. Two men attempted to attack her, but she robbed them instead. As Sherlock continues to watch her from a distance, he grabs items along the way and dresses as a homeless man. He then got to meet the mystery man, someone Sherlock believes Irene is intimidated by. With Watson advising Sherlock to leave the case alone, Constable Clark rushes in and says the inspector needs him immediately, as Blackwood has come back from the dead. The groundskeeper claims to have seen him walking through the graveyard this morning. With Watson laughing at this claim, he tells Sherlock he is not coming, who responds by saying,
No girl wants to marry a doctor who can't tell if that's dead or not.
Once they arrive at the graveyard, they find the tomb holding Blackwood destroyed from the inside out. The inspector is trying to keep this information out of the press, and Holmes then goes to speak to the catatonic witness. The inspector then lectures his men on being a bunch of wimps and tells them to go grab the coffin. As Watson inspects the witness, he seems to be in shock. Once the troops bring out the coffin, the men pop it open and find a random man inside. With the time of death being about 10 hours ago, the witness stands up and says he saw Blackwood as clear as day, just as Holmes steals the dead man's watch and leaves with it. As the companions walk through the street, Watson seems to believe in the supernatural, while Sherlock, on the other hand, does not. Looking at the watch he stole, he analyzes it and finds the initials of Madison and Haig, the jeweler's shop. Going inside to get an address, they are approached by a gypsy woman who mentions the future as well as Mary. Inspecting Watson's hand, she begins talking about how he will be married to a fat woman and full of warts. Sherlock mocks her, and they have a pit stop to buy Mary a ring. As Holmes goes himself to the address of the man who bought the watch, Watson has a quick look backwards before leaving. Sherlock begins unlocking a door, and Watson comes back and smacks it open. Holmes mentions how he will miss their adventures together when Watson gets married. Inside the man's house, they discover a lab with some very dangerous substances. It seems their man was attempting to combine sorcery and science, finding burnt pages and attempting to make them readable. The man was quite the sicko who seems to have been working for Blackwood and the same man Irene was looking for. Out of nowhere, two men arrive to burn down the place. Problematically, a third man arrives on the scene, and he low-key might not be human. A fight gets underway immediately, and let's just say, the barbarian is going to be tough to beat. With Watson taking on the other two attackers and dropping his ring, Sherlock is forced to use the equipment around him to his advantage. However, the brute comes back and Sherlock does a perfect move and immobilizes the men. The brute then takes off running, and Holmes chases him down while Watson is forced to leave the ring to help his comrade. Sherlock eventually chases down the culprit to a boat construction and interrogates the man on who sent him. But the unit fears Blackwood more than Sherlock's little toy and electrocutes himself without hesitation. Breaking the rod, he begins walking toward Sherlock, who is in deep trouble right now. Just as the boat is moving out of place, Watson arrives on the scene and misses quite a few shots. With Sherlock being knocked out directly in front of the boat, the man releases it, but it seems Sherlock somehow avoided it. With the chain coming at him, Watson saves his ass, and the boat problematically sinks. In jail sometime later, the two have stayed in holding the entire night when Watson begins losing it.
I am psychologically disturbed.
You never complained about my methods before.
Where you deliberately withhold your plans from me. I never complain. When do I complain about your general lack of hygiene? When do I complain that you experiment to sabotage my relationship with Mary?
Watson's bail is soon posted by Mary, but Sherlock must remain on his own. The inspector soon arrives at the scene and finds Sherlock entertaining the whole inmate population. Walking him out, Holmes is handed the newspaper, and it seems the cat is out of the bag. Being told to clean up for his friends in high places who got him out, Sherlock enters a carriage only to be bagged up and transported to meet a very powerful person. Sherlock immediately recognizes the man to be Sir Thomas Rotherham, Lord Chief Justice. But with the sacred ox on his ring, he is the secret head of the Temple of the Four Orders, to where they sit at the headquarters. This group includes the highest levels of society, including the Home Secretary Lord Coward and the American Ambassador John Standish. They explain the practices of their order, including the supernatural one, which seems to have been used for nefarious reasons by Blackwood. As they know, Sherlock doesn't believe in magic. They just want him to bear fear to Blackwood, to which Sherlock deduces he is the son of Sir Thomas. This information is not public, though, and must remain hidden. Thomas explains Blackwood was conceived during one of their rituals, and Blackwood's mother was not his wife. The woman died giving birth, and the cursed child's power grows daily. The Book of Spells is where he gets his power from, and all they want is for Sherlock to stop him and offer all the power and money they can give. He accepts the task, but not for money, and tells Sir Thomas he is most likely next to be killed. Heading straight to Irene's hotel to break in, he is caught red-handed and instead handed a bottle. After inviting himself in, he tells Irene the man she's looking for is buried in Blackwood's tomb. Sherlock then tells her that he was the homeless man who approached the carriage earlier. After he opens up the bottle and pours for two, he immediately begins toppling over and realizes Irene put something into the bottle. Once nighttime arrives, Sir Thomas is having a relaxing bath when all the lights suddenly go out. The moron doesn't think twice about it, but he suddenly gets stuck in the water, and Blackwood arrives on the scene to watch his father die and steal his ring. The following day, Sherlock is discovered by the hotel workers and soon retells the tale to the officers. Immediately heading to Sir Thomas's residence for the murder that took place, Sherlock inspects the bathtub and tells them they're morons for draining the water away. Taking a seat on the chair and laughing, they smell some jasmine bath salts, and Holmes wants the officers looking around. As they all leave, he discovers a secret room and makes his way inside. There he sees some really weird shit. Grabbing a few items and hiding them for himself, the officers arrive and he leaves. That night, the secret order conducts an emergency meeting. There, Coward has invoked the gathering and nominates Blackwood as their new leader. Standish laughs at him just as the man makes his presence known. All men in the room become tense and frightened and listen to Blackwood speak on how he will make them all rule the future. At noon the next day, they will all make the first step, and magic will make the way for them. John is asked if he will join the rest of the men, but he refuses, as the magic is something a human cannot control. This leads him to pull out his pistol and fire away, which causes him to erupt in flames and tumble out the window to his death. The remainder of the men do not utter another single word, and all pledge their allegiance to Blackwood. As the sun shines bright the next day, just kidding, London doesn't know what the sun is. But on a serious note, Sherlock decides to throw a corpse onto Watson's table, John Standish. Finding out his hair is flammable, the two find unique substances on him that can be found from a factory near the river. Watson refuses to join Sherlock in the mission and gets an itch as his comrade walks away. With Sherlock and Watson boarding a boat with one of their old friends, they soon jump out of the boat and discreetly make their way into the factory. With the lab from earlier being replicated, something mechanical was just moved, and the two make their way into a slaughterhouse. Now this is where it gets interesting. They spot Roman numerals on the wall when Blackwood screams at Sherlock. With their enemy coming from behind, the two waste all their bullets when a fire suddenly activates, and Irene being dragged right into it. Sherlock thinks quickly and covers himself and Irene in clothes as Watson turns the flames off. Problematically, Irene continues to the slaughter machine. Sherlock attempts to cut her free, and when he isn't able to do so, he causes the machine to stall and Watson turns off a valve. With the duo putting their weight onto Irene, they manage to save her with seconds left. Watson goes after Blackwood and Irene thanks Sherlock for saving her. With Watson seeing their attacker, he runs towards him but triggers a trap just as Sherlock comes outside. The explosion then erupts, sending the place into flames. Holmes attempts to cover up for the continual fire coming at him, and alongside Irene he drops to the ground for cover. After waking up a while later, Clark arrives on the scene to find Sherlock out of it. He nonetheless tells his friend that Lord Coward has issued an arrest warrant for him, and sends him away before anyone else finds him. With Irene attempting to escape the next day via a train, it seems to be delayed, and she finds the hooded man already waiting for her. Saying he did not give her permission to leave, she tries explaining that the contract was fulfilled, but he wants her to find out what the dead man he was looking for made Blackwood. As night comes back around, Watson is being attended to by Mary and a private doctor. But as the doctor leaves, we notice it is Sherlock in disguise, and so does Mary, who wants him to solve the case. Holmes then heads to a deserted area and plays his guitar while going through his memories. Deciding to go to the Book of Spells, he begins making one of the spells from it to see if it actually works. Seeing his memories over and over, there is something he is missing, but going through everything he awakens to see Watson and Irene in front of him. As Sherlock is being hunted down by the general public, he wants to let the team in on his thoughts. He explains that when Blackwood invited him to come to prison, he had suggested Sherlock to widen his gaze. Blackwood's method is based on a ritualistic mystical system that the Temple of the Four Orders have used for centuries, reenacting the ceremony they were doing. Holmes has now become enlightened, explaining that the Order believed the Sphinx was a door to another dimension. It is made up of 4 parts. The foot of a lion, the tail of an ox, the wings for eagle, and the head of a man, the exact items Sir Thomas had. Opening a map, he states the 5 points of the stars represents the 5 murdered women. With Blackwood killing 3 people, each murder was committed in a location that has a direct connection with the temple, therefore the system. The dead alchemist represents man. Sir Thomas wore the ox ring. The ambassador for America represents the eagle, and that leaves the lion. Its location is at the Parliament when suddenly, the inspector arrives in the building, causing Sherlock to help his friends to escape before being caught and arrested. Being transported away, he is taken directly to Lord Coward, only for the inspector to reveal he is part of the Order. Punching Holmes in the stomach, Coward tells Sherlock to have a seat. Sherlock begins recounting the details and how Coward was there when he saved the innocent girl's life, closing the chimney to push the smoke into the room. Coward confesses Parliament will receive mercy today and turns around to see Holmes missing and smoke everywhere. Sherlock thanks him for giving away Blackwood's location, saying he noticed the mud on his boots, a touch of red brick dust on his knee, and a small bandage from the vow he made alongside a faint aroma of excrement on where he has been standing leads him to the sewer system. With the entire government being present at Parliament today, Holmes chucks away his handcuffs and Coward tells him the Parliament members will receive their fate at noon, just as Holmes reveals himself and once again jumps out of a window and into the water below. Watson was already waiting for him with a boat though, and Sherlock tells Watson that the inspector played his part brilliantly and acted like he was part of the order, wanting to go to the tunnel under the sewers where Coward's outfit had led him to. The captain makes his way there. As hundreds of people protest the return of Blackwood and want him to be their leader, the representatives make their way inside the Parliament just as Sherlock's team discover a chemical weapon below the Parliament guarded by men. Now they know the first dead man was aiming to change biological warfare and seems to have succeeded. Irene starts the fight and the order sit in Parliament upstairs. With the fight below tipping in the favor of the group, Irene helps Sherlock kill his attacker. Lord Coward then calls upon all members of Parliament and announces the return of Blackwood, who makes his presence known once again. Claiming to have returned from beyond the grave, he can see the people's fear for him and will use that as a weapon. With Sherlock and Irene thinking of a way to disarm the chemical bomb, it seems to be quite the machine. Problematically, the brute from earlier arrives on the scene and Sherlock is in trouble. With Blackwood activating the device, Watson and Sherlock try to take down the giant. Using their wits and what they can, Irene thinks of a way to deactivate the device and tries her plan out. As Blackwood keeps talking and no one listens to him, Irene rips out a part of the machine and takes off running. Sherlock chases her and Blackwood makes an escape. Irene has no idea what to do and Blackwood sees her running. As Sherlock follows, Watson does a Khabib choke to knock out the brute. With the remaining men chasing Irene, she arrives at the construction of a bridge. She nearly falls to her death though and realizes she is trapped. With Sherlock behind her, he tells her to go and he will not chase her anymore. Wanting not to run anymore, Blackwood gets the jump on Irene and holds her over the edge. Pushing her off the bridge, he and Sherlock engage in a battle with Holmes swinging around like a monkey. Spotting Irene on a ledge but unconscious, the two adversaries fight their last battle. With Blackwood cheating and using a gun, Sherlock uses a rope to force Blackwood to hang onto the bridge for dear life, with Holmes saying it was never magic and just tricks. He starts with the prison guard he paid to fake being possessed, followed by his tomb already being broken beforehand. As Blackwood falls to his demise, Sherlock continues and speaks about Sir Thomas's bathtub, with Blackwood adding a sort of poison that was undetectable after the water was drained. The death of the ambassador was the same compound used to blow the wharf. As the ambassador was doused with the odorless substance, a spark from his gun ignited his switched bullet, erupting him in flames. And the last part was a chemical weapon distilled from cyanide and refined in the bellies of swine. Had it worked, his followers in Parliament would have watched, unharmed, as their colleagues would die around them, not knowing he gave them the antidote. With the world believing it to be real and would have followed him, Blackwood pleads for mercy and Holmes gives it to him. Telling him he is a fraud, Sherlock uses his surroundings to chain the scam artist and properly kill him for all of civilization to see. Checking up on Irene, she soon awakens in handcuffs. With a storm approaching, Irene confesses the masked man is named Moriarty, a professor who found her one weakness, which was Sherlock Holmes. Saying he is just as brilliant as Sherlock and is not to be underestimated, he tosses her the handcuffs and leaves. A while later, Watson and Mary go to visit Sherlock, who helped him buy a ring. With Sherlock attempting to figure out how Blackwood survived his execution, it seems the executioner attached a hook to a harness, allowing the weight to be distributed around the waist and the neck. Wanting to restore Watson's reputation, Holmes says there is a toxin which puts someone into a mortal paralysis, enough to mislead a medical mind. With the inspector requesting Sherlock's Holmes once again, this time it seems one of their sergeants went missing in the sewers on the day he stopped Blackwood. Being shot in the head with a small caliber bullet, Sherlock knows it to be Moriarty. He suspects that his new adversary stole a piece of Blackwood's device, but the question is why? With Watson's items officially out, Sherlock reopens the case, and with that the first movie cuts to an end. Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows begins 1 year later, with Watson using a typewriter to explain that random bombings in Europe have heightened tensions between Germany and France, with the bombings being conducted by an unknown group which people suspect may be anarchists. Sherlock has a completely different theory. The scene then cuts to Irene walking through the street and Sherlock hiding in plain sight, catching up to Irene and stealing a small parcel she is carrying. He pulls her aside and mentions 3 men have been tailing her for half a mile, and she quickly takes off with Sherlock. Being trapped, she explains they are escorting her, not chasing her. After taking back her package and leaving, Sherlock removes his disguise and a fight takes place, showing off his legendary fighting skills that has not been lost. 4 men is too much to beat, and fortunately, Sherlock is saved by a couple officers. As they leave though, Sherlock envisions what is about to happen and quite easily neutralizes his opponents and walks away. With Sherlock occupied, Irene travels to the Cromwell and Griff auction house. There, she meets Dr. Carl and hands over the package as payment for his services. The doctor also hands over a letter, and as Irene goes to leave, he requests for her to stay as he checks the package. Problematically, as he opens it, Sherlock stops him from triggering a hidden bomb. Stealing the letter from Irene, the doctor activates the explosive again, and Sherlock gets the attention of the audience and alerts them to a fire which causes an evacuation. As Irene also leaves the auction house, Sherlock places the bomb in a rare archaeological artifact and explains to the doctor that his mystery employer is the Napoleon of crimes. Sherlock leaves the building and eyes out a stranger. Finding the doctor dead outside, he hides the poison and leaves. Later, Irene travels to a fancy restaurant and has a small chat with her employer. Showing off his power by tapping his glass multiple times, everyone leaves the restaurant, and James Moriarty reveals himself upset that she lost the letter due to her affection for Holmes. Sometime later, Watson arrives at Baker Street to meet up with his dear friend. Inside the apartment is a literal jungle. Being shot at with some fake darts, Sherlock reveals himself as the master of disguise, and Watson wants him to be changed. Holmes instead tries convincing his old partner to join the case, but the conversation is interrupted by the nanny. She isn't too fond of Sherlock, and Watson reminds him that he is getting married tomorrow. Entering Sherlock's hidden room, or Watson's old office, Holmes reveals that he is investigating a string of events that appear unrelated at first glance. Murders, terrorist attacks, and business takeovers, including a scandal with an Indian cotton tycoon, the overdose of a Chinese opium trader, bombings in Strasbourg and Vienna, and the death of an American steel magnate, all of which he has linked to Moriarty. Sherlock then talks about the doctor who was killed earlier this week and how he must have had evidence on their enemy. Blabbering on about other things, Holmes decides to give his friend a wedding gift, which is sort of like adrenaline. With the duo traveling through the street in disguise, as Sherlock has some paranoia of his rival tracking him, they end up arriving at their location. Meeting Sherlock's brother, Mycroft Holmes, he is quite the weirdo, just like his brother. At Watson's bachelor party, which Sherlock forgot about and forgot to organize, he lets his friend know that his brother is a government official and a founding member of the Diogenes Club. With the party officially underway, Sherlock meets a Romani gypsy named Simza Heron, the intended recipient of the letter he took from Irene earlier. She opens the letter that was sent from her brother René, telling her to remember his face as she will never see it again, as he has paid the price to change the course of history. Sherlock wants to know what René is doing, but she tells him time is up. He tells her there is an assassin above them waiting to kill her and walks away. Thinking of how the fight will play out and how to defeat this assassin, he follows his instructions and deductions, but Simza injures the intruder. As the two run, the assassin follows close behind them, and I want to replay this scene a few times and try to figure out why the hell the man done a backflip on a wall when he could have just turned around. Anyways, the fight continues through the entire building, and Sherlock has quite the battle with the attacker. With men surrounding them and cheering the fight on, the assassin scales a tower to kill Simza. When he catches up to her, he easily disarms her until Sherlock comes and kicks the goon into the water below. Watson then appears clearly off his head, and Sherlock grabs the letter and leaves. The next day is finally Watson's big day, and it starts off quite horrible. Waking up hungover and both bloodied and bruised, Sherlock is quite the best man. As the ceremony commences, Mary is dressed to perfection, and Watson is a mess alongside his comrade, getting married and completing the ceremony. Sherlock is approached by one of Moriarty's men and told the professor wants to meet. Getting the time and location, Sherlock rides off and goes to the university where the professor works. With Sherlock handing a book for the professor to sign, Moriarty gets directly to the point as Sherlock analyzes the room as well as the signature.
The psychological analysis of handwriting. The upward strokes on the P note a highly creative yet meticulous nature.
With the professor saying that when two objects collide there must be collateral damage, he pretty much threatens Watson as well as his new wife. Irene was also poisoned and killed because Sherlock got too close. But the only reason that Sherlock is alive is the amount of respect the professor has for him. But this nonetheless doesn't hinder Sherlock, who will return the favor and grabs Irene's napkin before leaving. At the train station, the newlyweds arrive in their first-class carriage. Once night hits, one of the train workers arrive and gives his compliments to the two. However, he turns out to be an assassin, which Watson neutralizes and dumps out of the carriage. Grabbing his gun, he opens the door to find a woman shooting off Moriarty's men. Seems the woman is Sherlock in disguise, who comforts Mary. Knowing that half a dozen men are on the way, Mary is pushed from the train into the water below. When Watson realizes what he's done, he jumps on Sherlock and starts laying into him. With the two getting into a fight, we go through Sherlock's memories and how he managed to swap one of the men's bullets for one of his devices, which causes them all to die. Setting a trap, Sherlock climbs on the side of the train and Watson follows. The trap sets off with perfect timing and the duo boot two people from the carriage. Telling Watson to lie down with him, their attackers load up and fire through the carriage with a heavy weapon. Waiting for an opportunity that Sherlock set up, Watson shoots the assailant, but another one jumps in only for the bullet they fired to explode and end their assault. With the duo finally back together, Sherlock explains that Mary is in good hands as his brother was waiting for her in the water. Watson is then elaborated on why Moriarty targeted him, and Sherlock makes it clear it is all Watson's fault, as the case would have already been finished if he didn't get married. Sherlock tells his dear friend this will be the last time he will ask for help, and Watson agrees to a final mission together where they will start in Paris to find Simza. Moriarty in the meantime signs books for all his fans when his man hands him a ticket. At a gypsy camp on the outskirts of Paris, the two detectives ask some young men for Sims's location. Being robbed while walking into the camp, a man there says he is Sims and takes Watson's scarf, which results in a knockout. After Simsa finally reveals herself, Holmes tells her that she is being targeted because her brother is working for Moriarty and may have said something to her that she shouldn't know. Handing the detective some drawings from her brother, they deduce that the papers were kept in a wine cellar next to a printing press, with Simsa suspecting it may be at the headquarters of an anarchist group specialized in making bombs. Both Simsa and her brother used to work for them until they became too much. At Sherlock's brother's estate, Mary is alive and well. But I will once again say, Mycroft is quite the weirdo. Back with the duo, they travel alongside Simsa and arrive at the terrorist stronghold. Simsa takes them through the place and they meet Claude Ravichet. Opening up to the group, he speaks of a well-dressed Englishman, Moriarty, who dictates their every move and controls them. Regretting making a deal with that devil, he kidnapped Claude's child and wife, but tonight it will be over. Planting a bomb somewhere for Moriarty, there is only one way Claude can save his family: no loose ends. Sherlock tells Watson to cover the stairs and he begins analyzing the room and deduces that there is a secret door in the room, escaping and closing the entrance behind them. Sherlock believes the bomb is at the opera and they make their way onto the street. Running through the place and arriving at a performance underway, one of Moriarty's men spots them. With Sherlock quite easily finding the bomb and taking out its security, he grabs a knife and rips open the box only to find it empty. Looking into the crowd and spotting Moriarty, it seems his rival has tricked him, and they are in the wrong location. The bomb suddenly detonates at the Hotel du Triomphe, where it kills quite a number of assembled businessmen. Sherlock also deduces that the bomb was just a cover to kill one specific person with a sniper. Watson then realizes only a handful of men in all of Britain can pull off a shot at that distance and says it was Sebastian Moran, a disgraced soldier. The next day, after some investigating, Sherlock says the entire ordeal was to cover the assassination of Alfred Meinhard. Being a massive guns dealer, a couple days ago, a large share of his company was sold to Moriarty, who will now take ownership of the weapons factory in Germany. As they know their enemy will be traveling via train, they work out exactly which one it is and also start their travels to Germany on horseback. Needing to cross the border, the gypsies help them across the vast landscape until they eventually arrive at their destination. Once at the weapons facility, Sherlock wants Watson to telegraph a message to Mycroft while he makes his way around. With Watson sending the message, Sherlock goes into one of the main parts of the factory. Realizing the danger these weapons would be in the hands of a lunatic, he looks into a room to see the grand plan and design of Moriarty. As Watson completes sending the message, Sherlock comes into one of the most powerful rooms in the world and is spotted by Moriarty's man. Telling him to pick up one of their very own pistols, Sebastian aims his gun at Sherlock, who is then put to sleep. Watson in the meantime returns to find Sherlock, but instead discovers a letter saying "come once it is convenient" alongside a hand-drawn image of a tower. At the factory, Moriarty wants to know who Sherlock sent the message to, but Sherlock speaks of how Moriarty used the anarchists and their bombs to create a crisis in Europe. Under various organizations, he bought or murdered his way into industries such as cotton, opium, or weapons that will all be shipped within a week. Wanting to cause a world war for his benefit and outstanding profit margins, Watson is caught by one of the guards with Sebastian aiming with his sniper. Firing off a couple shots and just barely missing Watson, Sherlock is yanked from the ground where Moriarty plans on torturing him. Playing music around the entire facility, Moriarty sings along to it while Watson is pinned down. Hearing Sherlock being tortured on the speaker, Watson tries helping but cannot move. With Holmes being asked who he sent the telegram to, he cannot handle the pain and says he sent it to Mycroft. Watson, on the other hand, jumps into a massive turret, causing Sebastian to take off running. He then shoots down the tower just as Sherlock requested in his note, which falls into the factory. As Watson seeps through the rubble, he finds Holmes beneath it and rips him out. Helping his friend out of this shithole, the two arm themselves and Sebastian finds Moriarty, who wants him to find their intruders. With Simsa and the gypsies helping the duo escape, a gunfight ensues and their enemies are gunned down with precision. Attempting to scale a wall, their enemies surround them and begin firing a turret and shoot a rocket which destroys a wall behind them. With everyone escaping into the woods, the Germans begin screaming and shouting orders to one another. Sebastian the lunatic jumps right onto the battlefield and almost kills Watson. The team is in some deep shit, with bullets flying and grenades landing and blowing up right beside them. The Germans decide to use one of their military-grade weapons, and it launches into the woods and hits some of the gypsies. With Sherlock disorientated, he and Watson get back up and fight. As the explosions continue, Watson lands a shot on Sebastian when they suddenly hear a train approaching. Jumping into it alongside Simsa, Sebastian is still alive and fires a marksman shot to kill a gypsy. After some time passes, the group alongside Watson are treated by Watson when Sherlock suddenly stops breathing, attempting to raise his legs and restart his heart. Seconds turn into more seconds, which goes to a minute, causing Watson to scream for his friend to come back. Remembering the wedding gift, suddenly he stabs it into Sherlock's heart, and he wakes in a complete frenzy, making Watson calm him down. Attending to his wounds in the nicest of ways, the duo both decide enough is enough and to go home. Sherlock wants to go home via Switzerland though, and believes Moriarty wants to attend a peace summit to initiate a war. At the summit in an amazing castle, Mycroft refuses to cancel the event, as his superiors will not allow it due to Moriarty being friends with the Prime Minister. Sherlock is then told to stop inhaling Mycroft's oxygen machine. Sherlock believes at the summit there will be just one assassin, Sims's brother Rene. With Moriarty already arriving at the event, Mycroft says the target will either be the German Chancellor and his ambassador or the French Prime Minister and his man. The other nations are just deciding which way to lean if a war starts. With Sherlock taking Simsa to the dancing floor to look out for the assassin, he analyzes the entire room to the smallest detail. Noticing something strange, he changes his dancing partner and is suspicious of a young German man with a massive scar on his face. He and Watson then come down to the conclusion that the doctor that was murdered earlier was at the forefront of experimental surgeries, and based off some of Moriarty's men, it seems that Rene received a radical reconstructive surgery and is in disguise as one of 6 men at the summit. As Watson and Simsa go searching for the assassin, Sherlock hands one of the guards a message and walks to the balcony. The guard hands the message to Moriarty, who is starting to get annoyed. He joins Sherlock on the balcony with a chess set in the middle. Playing a 5-minute blitz game, the match starts and the two inside look out for the assassin. Using what they know about Rene, such as him being left-handed or having colored eyes, they drop the candidates to 2 men, and Simsa believes she knows who the right one is, with Watson hesitating to tackle the wrong man down as it will lead to disaster. The assassin loads a bullet and Moriarty tells Sherlock that his team will not be able to find the assassin. Watson proves him wrong though, and he intentionally drops wine cups on the ground to see that one man's reaction was completely off. Using this, Simsa approaches her brother and pleads for him to stop, but he refuses and fires a missed shot as Watson tackles him to the ground. Being escorted out, Moriarty is impressed by Sherlock's bishop. Sebastian then fires a poison dart onto Rene and Watson tries to save him. Spotting the poison dart, he also sees Sebastian as Simsa screams for her brother to stay with her. Moriarty makes Sherlock understand that the telegram he sent didn't inspire anyone to stop him. Instead, all the members have a subconscious desire for war. With war on an industrial scale being inevitable, even if it takes a couple of years to initiate on its own, Moriarty will be there and will be waiting to make a fortune. Holmes quite ingeniously reveals he is mistaken. Having attended multiple lectures on campus, he had noticed Moriarty's notebook. It then came to him with an empire so big even he needed it to be written somewhere. He then managed to buy an exact duplicate and swapped it out when he was being tortured. Containing all of Moriarty's plans and financial records, the original was sent to Mary in London, who decrypted the code using a book Holmes had noticed in Moriarty's office during their first encounter. Mary relays the information to Inspector Lestrade, who seizes most of Moriarty's assets, leaving him financially ruined. Moriarty cannot believe he lost to Holmes, and makes him understand that Watson and his wife will suffer a terrible ending. As Sherlock begins predicting and deducing the outcome of an imminent battle to the exact detail, Moriarty problematically plays the same game and they both figure out the outcome of the fight and understand that Moriarty would win, given Holmes' injured shoulder. Instead, Holmes grabs Moriarty and with Watson opening the door and having a look, Sherlock pulls them both over the balcony, plunging into the Reichenbach Falls. Watson stares in disbelief as the two rivals plunge over the edge, and with such a fall they will both surely die. Watson's heart breaks knowing his friend just sacrificed his life, and with no bodies recovered, they are declared dead. At Sherlock Holmes Memorial, hundreds of people attend, and even though Sherlock wasn't the best man, he changed the course of history. After Holmes Memorial, Watson and Mary prepare to leave for their delayed honeymoon. Watson, while finishing the last lines of The Adventure of the Final Problem, receives a package containing Mycroft's breathing device. Realizing that Holmes is still alive, he rushes out to find the delivery man. Meanwhile, Holmes, having hidden in Watson's office, comes out of hiding and types a new eulogy and adds a question mark after the end. Thank you so much for